afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For you first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that they've decided to talk about or we've decided to talk about. And we've got a repeat guest here about the fourth or fifth time in the last 10 years, Lloyd Morbett, delightful human being. We're cut from the same cloth, radical leftists, progressive liberals, and all that kind of stuff. And good to see you again,
It is
my
wonderful
friend.
to see you again.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to appear on your show and wear your signs. I definitely want to cause reference to be made to this sign. I think it's terribly important. So
You're so important to me is because what you're about and what you do in your waking hours is just formidable. You rank way up there with people who I admire through the years who really walk the talk. Lloyd Morbett walks the talk.
God, Don, you're ruining my life. I'm gonna have to live up to this now. I mean, geez.
You're living up to it. And I'm not blowing smoke at you, buddy. All right? Is your cell phone off?
Oh, that's a good one. Thanks.
On occasion, I forget mine's on too.
Boy, I'll tell you, isn't it amazing how these things have become ubiquitous?
Yeah.
There we go. It is off.
35-cent words on me here.
Thank you.
And as you viewers know, the show typically goes in two segments. Usually the first half is about who my guest is, so you know some idea where he's coming from and why he has the views that he does. And we're going to do an abbreviated version of the bio segment because there's so much that Lloyd is going to talk about.
Well, we're going to cover some ground, I think. But, well, it's all part of the bio, too, in some ways,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get to this position without working through some issues.
Yeah. How are you feeling right now?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm overall, but I've had some health problems. And
Health problems?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
15 years ago, we might as well start with that. 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with diabetes and adult onset diabetes. And I told my family about it. My mother was very concerned about this because she said that, there was no history of diabetes in my family. Mm-hmm. So there was always this question mark in my mind, why did I get this? Because I thought my diet was pretty good and all that, but, I just couldn't quite figure it. And at the same time that started happening, I was diagnosed with neuropathy, which is basically the nerve endings in my feet were beginning to deteriorate or whatever. I was losing feeling.
Uh-oh.
And now I've lost feeling up to my knees. I mean, it's...
Today?
As of today,
oh,
yes.
For God's sakes.
So again, question mark. I was told by... fortunately, at that time, I had Kaiser as, my health facility that I could go to, and they said that, this is probably a result of your diabetes, and it progressively gets worse, and there's nothing we can do for it. I mean, that's basically what they told me. And then in 2013, I was talking with some veteran friends of mine. I've never really been proud of my military service, but I am a Vietnam vet, and I was in the United States Navy for a year, and I went over there, and it was an eye-opening experience, and I was not a frontline war hero, but I saw a lot, and it caused me to really begin to question authority. I mean,
Well, let's stop there because we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Oh, okay.
I want the viewers to know a little more about who you are personally, and we'll go back to Vietnam.
We'll go back to Vietnam, okay, and then I can tell you the rest of this story, so.
And, yeah.
Okay.
And your full name is, tell me your full name again,
My
Lloyd.
full name is Lloyd Knox Marbett. So there you have the whole
The middle name?
Knox.
Why is
Like
that?
Fort Knox. Interestingly enough, my name is all last names of my family. Lloyd is my grandmother's maiden name, Knox is my mother's maiden name, and Marbett was my father's maiden name. So there you got it.
You're a maiden.
They saddled me with it, and I hated it.
Lloyd, if I were to ask your best friend, who is Lloyd Marbett? In the first person, what would your best friend say? Lloyd is what?
God, I hope I got a best friend.
You got
A
many.
consumer activist, a pain in the ass. You know, I could go on.
Yeah, you want to go on some more? Lloyd is a consumer advocate, a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
and
right.
a
A
family
good friend.
circle.
A good friend.
A good friend.
Yeah, there you
He's
go.
a good friend.
I try.
You
Yeah.
bet you are, yeah. All right. And you were born when and where?
I was born July 16th, 1947 in Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Why were you born?
Geez, why was I born? Well, my father was in the Army Air Corps, and he was flying bombing missions over Germany and was shot down. And ended up, or some kind of an accident happened, and he ended up in a hospital where my mother was a Red Cross nurse, and something must have happened because I showed
there
up.
it is.
I showed up as a product of that beginning relationship.
So that's why you were born.
Yeah, I guess that was why I was born. Yeah.
Is there anything significant worth mentioning about your cultural heritage? Or you're plain old American white bread?
You know, interestingly enough, again, both of my grandparents were, my grandfathers were Presbyterian ministers. So there was a lot of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant steeping indoctrination that went on early in my life.
Sure.
And but then again, both of my parents were preachers' kids, and the whole story about preachers' kids is that they're screwed up, and I think there's probably a lot of truth to that.
You're the living proof of it, huh?
So I managed to live through all that and become who I am.
Do you have a religious preference today?
Well, you know, I think I kind of lean towards the Native American view of the Great Spirit. That's kind of where I think I come down.
Can you say a couple more words about the Native American view of the Great Spirit?
Well, just the fact that, you know, it seems like the important perspective that I have found in my life has been to try and, you know, help preserve Mother Earth and the whole experience of life, and that has always been the most profound spiritual awakening that has happened within me, anyway.
How did you arrive at that view of religion? Or
You know, I don't know. It's kind of funny. I don't know really. It just kind of evolved that way. You know, I had a hard time with the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant end of things.
Is that where you started from?
Oh, of course. I mean, you know, I was indoctrinated in the whole, you know, religious viewpoint of my parents, and one of my grandfathers would put me on his knee and, you know, talk about how he assumed that I was going to go the same path he had gone, and that God would be speaking to me, and I guess I was waiting around to get the message, but the only message I got was the one that I have now. So.
And I love it. I love it. How about your formal education? Is there anything interesting about that?
Well, I have up to a year of college. The reason why I don't have, I guess, more than that is because, you know, we were starting to talk about Vietnam. I came back from Vietnam greatly disillusioned by my experience, you know, what I saw there. And it made me, you know, what I saw there was totally a contradiction to what I was indoctrinated with when I went into boot camp. I mean, I was told that, you know, I was going overseas to save the Vietnamese people. I was, going to be this champion. And when I got there, what I discovered is that, basically the Vietnamese people were more afraid of me than they were of the so-called enemy. And and I think the reason for that being that we were committing such atrocities. You look at, My Lai and the various things that occurred. We had no business being there. It was a civil war between, the two people, basically the Vietnamese people, and we were messing with their lives. I mean, we were just interjecting ourselves into it in this big political picture, and we went there under dishonest motives.
So that's when you started recognizing the disillusionment and how the crap they gave you wasn't the reality of what was going on.
Well, I came back and I began to read Vietnamese history. That's what I started to do. And these are an amazing people who have, they've always been very independent. They've stood up to the Chinese,
yes,
for generations. And, they wanted self-determination, and they were greatly abused by the colonialism of the French who occupied them. And, what business did we have going there trying to preserve, the status quo, when in fact the status quo was oppressing these people?
Yes.
And I don't know, it was an eye-opener for me, and of course it set me on the path of activism that I'm on now. I mean, when I first learned about...
You've been at it for a while, huh?
Yes, but when I first learned about, the problems of the nuclear fuel cycle, the first thought that occurred to me is that it was like the war come home. It was like the Vietnamese War come home. Here was another basic lie being told to us about, the need for this technology and all of its problems, and supposedly they were all resolved. And though here we are all these years later, and we still have the problems of waste disposal, we still have the problems of radiation exposure, on and on and on.
What did you do all of your life to feed yourself, to earn a living?
Well, I live by my wits, and I live simply too. I mean, I guess my kids in some ways have suffered because of that. I lived a pretty Spartan lifestyle. And fortunately, when I first came to Portland, I ran into my garbage collector, who told me what a wonderful living could be made out of dumpster diving, and I did that for a while.
You're kidding me.
I sold newspapers. No, I've always, I had to really think it through in order to do what I do. And then along the way, I ran into people that enabled me to become an activist. For example, when in 1977, I had been caretaker for the Bank of California on 150 acres that was next to the Clackamas River, and they were allowing me to live there rent-free at the time. And then they sold this property that they owned to some executive with some lumber company, Crown Zellerback, maybe, I can't remember.
That's here in Oregon.
That's here in Oregon, and this guy
is going worldwide now.
This guy evicted me. When he discovered that at that time I was starting to be known as an anti-nuclear activist. Mm-hmm. This guy evicted me. I didn't know where I was going. I remember that day distinctly because I went walking down the road wondering where I was going to move my stuff. And across the river I ran into a wonderful man by the name of Earl Marsh.
What year was this?
This was in 1977. Wow. And he said to me, what's happening? How are you doing? We had waved at each other at different times, and I told him what was going on, and he said, okay. He says, I'll tell you what. He says, you can come live on my property under two conditions. Mm-hmm. And I says, what is that? And he said, one is that everything you own has to be on wheels. Mm-hmm. So that, if I have to go, I have to go. And then the second thing is that I could live there rent-free as long as I did my work as an activist. Changed my life. That's how I stayed alive.
All those years?
All those years. And I still live on that property. I caretake that property. He's died. His lovely wife has died. His daughter is still alive, and she lives in the main house, and I'm in a little house that got built in the woods, and I've managed to keep going.
And you managed to have children.
I have 2 children, yes.
And how old are they, and where are they?
I have a daughter who was born in 1970, so let's see, what would she be now? About 44, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And I have a son who is 27, and he's living in Arcata. My daughter is like looking in the mirror. She's definitely inherited her father's characteristics. We go toe to toe on stuff, but we're close. And she wanted to go to Hollywood. She wanted to be an actress, and so that's where she set off to be. Now she works as a personal assistant for actors and actresses. And my son is, he went to Humboldt State University, got a degree in economics and a degree in environmental engineering, and he now works for an engineering firm down in California.
So neither of them joined the Tea Party?
Neither of them joined the Tea Party, but then again, neither of them followed me directly in the path of my activist footsteps, which I always kind of hoped that maybe, they'd find
Hope
old Dad.
springs eternal.
Yeah, I know.
And why do I ask anyhow? Because it's a ritual. Your political persuasion, are you left, right, center,
Progressive, I guess.
why progressive instead of liberal? You're characterizing yourself.
I guess the reason why I like, I actually belong to the Progressive Party, and the reason why I joined the Progressive Party is because the position that the Progressive Party takes on the issues, I think, are life-saving, and what we need to do in order to help extricate ourselves out of this huge dilemma that we're confronting, such as what's here in the banner next to us. And, it just seems to me that that would be the only choice that I could make, knowing what I know anyway.
And you're a Ralph Nader supporter.
I am a great admirer of Ralph Nader, a great admirer.
All right, a couple more questions. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Do you have any kind of memberships worth mentioning that the viewers would be curious about?
Well, not really, except I guess the Progressive Party. That's a good one to be involved in.
Yeah, I know some fine people who belong to the Progressive Party. Persons from the past or alive today that you admire or admired or looked up to. Any names come to mind?
Well, Mahatma Gandhi played a big role. Ralph Nader has played a great role in, I think, setting the example for the kind of activism that I'm involved in. Rachel Carson. I remember reading her when I was first going my first year of college. There's people like that.
Why Mahatma Gandhi? Why did you admire him?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I left New York and I came to Oregon by accident, and one of the things that was troubling me greatly because of my experience in Vietnam was, why are we always at war? Seems like we're always at war. And I wanted to understand what that was all about, so I started going to the library and I was reading all these books of psychology, and there was, I think there's a psychologist by the name of Erik Erikson.
Oh, yes.
Comes to mind. And he had written a book about Mahatma Gandhi. And I read that book, and I was floored that someone like that man could, assume such an amazing perception of life and make such great changes. I mean, he was just like you and me. He had his flaws, but he was an amazing man. I mean, and he was very much committed to nonviolence. And I've always, even though I grew up, my father was a violent in his parenting, and I had a lot of problems with that, and I feel a lot of my father in me at times. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me take a sip here.
We'll have Roger do something about those coughs, but we'll be fine.
So anyway, I admired Gandhi's effort to confront things in peace, and felt that was the right way to go. And so he was a model for my life.
Mm-hmm. Good model, great model. What about Martin Luther King?
Martin Luther King is definitely another example of that, but then so is Malcolm X. I mean, I think Malcolm X was an amazing man too. And, and I...
You're a radical, you're not just a progressive.
Oh, I guess. I don't know, it just seems to me that the examples that have been set for us by these people it's not so much a radicalism or progressivism or whatever. It's just a way of being, which is important to try and walk in that path.
How about that four-letter word that's not safe to mention anymore, because then you're weird? Love.
Oh yeah, love.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's stop this segment kind of early so we can talk about this banner and so much other stuff. You're always so full of stuff to talk about.
I want to finish the health thing, because I think
Please
it's important, because
of course.
it has opened a perspective in my life that I wasn't looking for. I mean, like I say, 15 years ago, I was told that I had diabetes. Shortly after that, I was diagnosed with neuropathy. The neuropathy has gotten worse. The diabetes has gotten worse. And then in 2013, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And before that happened,
just last year.
Yeah, just before the prostate cancer diagnosis, I have some veteran friends who said to me, you should get health care through the Veterans Administration because you're a veteran. And my response was, I hated the military. I am not proud of my military service. I think our reason for being there was wrong, and we harmed a lot of people. I said, I don't feel comfortable doing this. But the more they talked with me, they convinced me that I should go talk to the state provides counselors for veterans to help them understand what their access to benefits can be.
Sure.
So I went and talked with one of these counselors, and so this person says to me, "You got any health effects?" Now at the time, I only had two health effects, and I said diabetes, and he goes Agent Orange. And then I go, neuropathy. He says, Agent Orange. And it was like a light went on. I suddenly realized that I had apparently left Vietnam with, exposure to Agent Orange and the problems that it was causing in my body. And then when I at that point, they advised me to file a disability claim. And my doctor, this was a very interesting thing too, I ended up with a wonderful doctor, Dr. Stephen Lieberman at Kaiser. He's since retired.
That's here in Oregon?
Yeah, here in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said to me, listen, you've got three choices. Well, there's really a fourth. The fourth is I could do nothing, but he did not think that was going to be beneficial. Sure. Because my PSA readings were so high. So what he said is you've got, regular surgery, laparoscopic, or they can go in directly. You've got radiation, two forms of that. And of course, I'm familiar with radiation, and that one didn't turn me on. And then he said, you can do what's called cryosurgery, which is where they go in and they shoot the prostate gland full of argon gas, and they freeze it, and basically kills the organ and kills the cancer. And I, after thinking it over, and just reached the conclusion that the cryosurgery was the way for me to go. So that's what happened. And in the process of meeting him and explaining to him about the veterans benefits, he says to me, you need to add prostate cancer to your disability claim with the Veterans Administration. That's also caused by Agent Orange. So now all of a sudden I've joined the cancer tribe, and I'm also now a victim of my military service, which I had not expected at all. And of course, it's made me more sensitive now to the problems that veterans are going through, not just the Vietnam War veterans, but, the veterans that have been exposed to, the uranium that they... depleted uranium weapons and their cancer effects, the veterans that were on board the aircraft carrier that was around Fukushima when they got hit with the radiation releases.
Yeah.
I mean, it's outrageous what is going on, and a lot of these people are simply trying to have their health problems taken care of by the very government that put them in harm's way.
Yeah.
And not only that, in many instances, put them in harm's way for wars that were, unjust and not legal.
Back to your physical health again. What's it look like for you? What can you tell now? The future.
I think one of the things I've discovered is that once you join the cancer tribe, you're always a member of the cancer tribe. So what happens is I will be monitored for the rest of my life. Right now, though, the PSA readings that I'm getting are so low that it looks as if the cancer's been put, I guess you could say, into remission. So that's
just last year this was done.
Just last year, yeah. I had this done in May, yeah. So that's the kind of the interesting side journey I've been on. In the meantime, as far as the activism goes, I of course have always been following the nuclear industry and concerned about the continuing problems that we have with it. But then, the issue of global warming has come up, and I have spent a lot of time trying to educate myself on that issue and have become involved in it. And that, of course, has led to my new bumper sticker, which I'm hoping that, people will be willing to put on their carbon burners as they run around, and we might consider...
Carbon burners, I've not heard that term before.
We might consider just exactly, the price that we're being asked to pay here. Catastrophic climate change is just another way to burn in hell. And, I that whole concept of burning in hell, it seems to me that this is kind of like that Dante's, journey into it's
depths.
craziness. The fact that we're being deliberately blinded to what is very strong evidence of the direction that we're going into.
Are you going to live to a ripe old age?
God,
I don't mince any words, you know that.
Well, I'm 70, what am I now? No, I'm not 70, Jesus, I'm 67 now. And
you're getting up there.
I'm getting up there, and, I don't know. I just do each day, but boy, I'll tell you, there's these twists and turns I wasn't looking for.
Does anybody love you?
Oh, yeah. I've got my children, I think, love me, and I'm in a really wonderful relationship with a woman who, Catherine Chuddy, who's also an activist, and she actually also is quite an amazing woman. She works for Legacy Emmanuel, and she is a counselor to children in crisis. And I mean, we're talking about the worst of crises that children can be in.
And she loves you.
Yeah, I think she does. She seems to
Has she
continue.
told you recently?
Yeah, she did, actually.
Do you love her?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Well, you better tell her right there in camera 3.
Camera 3. Catherine, I love you.
And you girls out there too late, he's already spoken for.
No, I love you too.
All you girls out there. Of all the girls I love you. You're an absolute delight, yeah. Let's take that break now and come back and talk about your other stuff. We'll talk about climate change and nuclear power and beyond. And I'm curious about the beyond part too. So,
Oh, well, the beyond part is basically what we're doing now. Just, broadening the conversation beyond those two issues. So,
all right.
yeah, don't make that into something heavy.
Hey,
It's all heavy.
Mr. East, shut us up, will ya? Okay, we are back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about. And we've been talking about my guest, Lloyd Marbett, his history, and the topic of the show, the title of the show, Climate Change, Nuclear Power, and Beyond. So why don't you lead off in the second half, and what shall we start talking about first?
Well, I thought maybe the first thing we might want to at least reference some of is the recent what's called the synthesis report on climate change for 2014 that was just issued by the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the United Nations body that it has the responsibility for assessing the climate science.
It's a United Nations document.
It's the United Nations document.
Mm-hmm.
And there's three quotes from this document which I thought I might share because one of the things that's kind of interesting is that everyone, I don't want to use terms like that, everyone. There's an appearance made in the media that somehow there's this huge debate going on over the science, climate science, and whether or not, we are actually involved in global warming. And, the John Oliver did a wonderful thing on that recently where he staged a debate because he wanted to point out that 97% of the scientists on the planet, we're talking about the planet, all of the National Academy of Sciences and all nations, all of them have reached the conclusion that climate change is happening, and not only that, we are a cause of it, and the report, this synthesis report, is a tremendous effort. It involves, reviewing all of the science that's out there and putting that into some kind of perspective so that policymakers can act on it.
Yes.
And the document is an interesting, you can get this document on the internet, but the document boxes various statements, and I just want to share three of them because I think these statements send a message that we should be more than sensitive to.
More than sensitive to climate change.
Right. Here's the first one. Many aspects of climate change and associated impacts will continue for centuries, even if anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases are stopped. And of course, the anthropogenic means man-made contributions of carbon to the atmosphere or greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. the risk of abrupt or irreversible changes increase as the magnitude of the warming increases. And we're seeing this. I mean, this is not something that there isn't many events that we can reference. You know, the hurricane off of the East Coast, which hit New York City and flooded the subways. New Jersey was hugely impacted by that. The fact that we have a drought going on in California, which affects pretty much a good part of the whole state.
Of course.
And looks a lot like the old Dust Bowl, which, there's a wonderful book about that called The Worst of the Worst Hard Times, which tells that story. And here, we're giving a direct warning that we're going to see more of what we're seeing, not less. And these record-breaking events are going to be superseded by more record-breaking events.
There has been major climate change in the past. The record shows that.
Right, hundreds of thousands of years back in time.
Yeah.
But nothing with the magnitude of the increasing carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere now, and that's of course an important point. And then in this document they address what's called the climate change risks reduced by mitigation and adaptation, and it seems like there's a lot of talk about how we can just adapt to this. Well,
and carbon savings and that kind of crap.
Look at what they have to say. Without additional mitigation efforts beyond those in place today, and even with adaptation, warming by the end of the 21st century will lead to very high risk of severe, widespread, and irreversible impacts globally. And then in paren they put high confidence, unquote, unparen, meaning that the scientists that have provided this evidence have great confidence that this is what we're going to confront.
A couple of examples of what will likely at the end of the 21st century: island nations disappearing, sea levels rising.
Right. And then, of course, this last quote, which is under a heading of characteristics of mitigation pathways. And I quote, "There are multiple mitigation pathways that are likely to limit warming below 2 degrees relative to pre-industrial levels." And 2 degrees is kind of like, there's been a number of benchmarks that people have pointed to. For instance, the 350 parts per million of carbon, which, by the way, ironically enough, we have surpassed.
Yes.
We're at 400 parts per million now, and increasing. These pathways would require substantial emission reductions over the next few decades and near zero emissions of carbon dioxide and other long-lived greenhouse gases by the end of the century. Now, this is the first time that they have said that we have to, by the end of this century, reach zero emissions of carbon. The challenge that is happening to us is first of all being willing to recognize the warning that is being passed on to us, and of course this leads to a book I'm reading now, which has become quite talked about. Naomi Klein has written a book called "This Changes Everything."
Yes.
And in this book, and I'm not done with this book, so I can't do a thorough book review. I want to warn everyone ahead of time. I fall short on that, but
I've done that one.
It won't be too much
terrific.
longer, and I'll have this book done. The thing that she does is she points to something that I think we've been seeing anyway. Just we haven't really kind of put the total picture together, possibly. But what's really going on now is a war between our economy and our life support systems. and basically capitalism and life support systems, basically the so-called free market, which is unregulated, and life support systems.
And this kind of capitalism,
this kind of capitalism is the kind of capitalism where, who needs regulation? We don't need regulation. You just have to trust the market to make the decisions.
Monopoly capitalism, crony capitalism.
Oh, it's all of that. And the fact of the matter is that the life support systems are losing the war. And of course, she tells the story about how when the first warnings of climate change was coming about in the 80s, when Jim Hansen was testifying about, the fact that this was on the horizon and something that we needed to confront. At the same time, there was this move to deregulate, the market, to the creation of the World Court, that would allow the economic agreements to supersede environmental protections.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just it's god awful, and the result of that, of course, leads us to where we are now. I think people have found it difficult, and I can understand. I mean, it's hard, Oliver, to be told all of a sudden that the lifestyle that you have been pursuing is actually may lead to the end of the opportunity to have life as we know it on this planet. I mean, that's a hard message to suddenly absorb, that maybe you're a part of the problem and you need to do something about it, and you need to educate yourself about it. And I mean, I really highly recommend that people read this book. And if you have other books that you would like to look at as regarding climate change, please do that. But we can help you also, improve your reading as far as that goes. But I also would like to point out that I really believe that we are beginning to confront the boundaries of destroying the earth in a way that is going to take a long time, if possible, to recover. And that's what has led to the development of this little bumper sticker, which, if you are interested, hopefully the contact information, yeah, there it is, will go up, and you can, if you would like to have a copy of this bumper sticker, we're giving them away. You can put them on your carbon burners, and hopefully it will be an incentive to convert your carbon burner to an electric vehicle, or the use of mass transit, of course, and changing the way in which we live so that we don't destroy our planet. Because now what these statements are telling us from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is that we're not going to stop the damage. The most that we can do now is mitigate the damage. We can hopefully reduce the severity of what we're going to inherit. If we do nothing about it, we are going to do what this bumper sticker says. I believe it. We are going to just find another way to burn in hell. And, I think if you go and you interview people in California, for example, who have been a part of the devastating fires that have been ignited by the droughts that are taking place down there.
Yes.
I don't think they would disagree with this analogy. And I would think also that, religious people who seem to think that, God would never let this happen to us. Well, the fact of the matter is my understanding of that whole religious perception is that, we have this so-called free will, which means that we literally can bring hell on earth. And I think we are. And I would, I personally don't want to see my children inherit that. Nor do I want to go personally in that direction. And so that's what, I've been working towards. Of course, I started out as an anti-nuclear activist, and one of the reasons why I still continue as an anti-nuclear activist is I don't want to see climate change used as an excuse to promote nuclear power. You know, there's the other insidious
What a
thing.
clever way to transition to the next part of our discussion.
Oh, okay. Well, it's true. I mean, you know, there's in Oregon, like for example, our congressional delegation signed on to a letter in support of a new reactor concept that was developed at Oregon State University that was spun out to a company called NuScale, which is building this what's called modular reactor design, where you take these enclosed modules of which are basically the same light water reactor design that was at Trojan, for instance, but they're in these enclosed modules. They're sunk into a swimming pool. There's you have maybe 10 of them. You have one control, facility that operates them, and they produce power. Now, you would look at this and you think, well, geez, that does sound like it's different, and they're claiming that it's safer. Of course, they're not talking about the fact that it's still the same old reactor design, and the radioactive waste that's being produced still has no place to go.
And the earthquake
the earthquake. Well, it may be able to withstand earthquakes better, but the problem, though, is that you still have to dig them up and take them in and put the waste somewhere when it's over. And we don't seem to take this on. We're so busy thinking in our minds, and it's not just limited to nuclear power. There's always this kind of thought that we're just going to develop this new mousetrap that'll take care of the problem.
Let me interrupt you for a second. I think the viewers need to know a little of your history and why you're so passionate about human nuclear power. Didn't you shut down the nuclear reactor at Hanford?
No, I did not.
What was your involvement in that?
By the way, there is a nuclear reactor at Hanford that's operating. It's not a part of the federal government.
Hanford's in Washington State.
Hanford's in Washington. Hanford was developed during World War II. There were reactors that were built on the Columbia River, once through cooling reactors. They took the water from the Columbia River, ran it through the reactors, fissioned the uranium, and all the heat and fissioning products that leaked out went back into the river. And at one time, the Columbia River was the most radioactive river in the world. I don't know whether a lot of people know that.
No.
Yes, but those reactors have been shut down. I mean, obviously, we began to wake up to the fact that there was something wrong here. Hanford is this reservation that is, been devoted to nuclear power. It's some 500, I can't remember how many.
Nuclear energy.
Acres. Oh, it's huge. It's it's been devoted to nuclear energy, and it's being cleaned up, they say, and who knows how long it's going to take to clean it up, and there's huge controversies around that. In the heart of that is a commercial reactor called the Columbia Generating Station, which is continuing to operate. There are people, there are groups of people that are trying to shut that down because that reactor is very similar in design to the ones that melted down at Fukushima. And when you think about Fukushima, what an amazing thing. First of all, the thing that's most amazing is the Fukushima accident is not over. They're still trying to, take out the fission material. The ocean is being used as a huge dump. Basically, every day, hundreds of thousands of gallons.
Every day, ongoing.
Every day, this accident continues, and yet it's out of sight, out of mind. The Japanese government has raised radiation levels so the exposures, more people can be exposed, and are acceptable according to them. And they've passed laws which make it hard for whistleblowers to tell the truth, and so we don't see.
They're learning from America.
Yeah, they're
whistleblowers.
Unfortunately, they've learned a lot from America, and the reactors themselves were bought from America. So we've managed to like drug addicts, spread the addiction, and now there are people that are suffering from it and trying to get out from under it.
Wouldn't there be a point in time when the nuclear waste would be so much and so much of it until we just can't add any more?
Well, You would think that's the case, but let's take Trojan, for example.
Trojan.
You know, most people don't even know there was a Trojan. You know, the used to be able to drive I-5 between Seattle and Portland, and you'd see the huge cooling tower and the containment structure. They've all been dynamited and taken away. But guess what? All the waste that was produced at Trojan is still a Trojan.
It's still there.
Yeah, it's sitting on a concrete pad. It's in these dry cast containers, and it's waiting for the garbage man. And when you go and look at all the other reactors in this country, they usually have a combination of circumstance, which is a large quantity of nuclear waste in their spent fuel pools, which are the pools, same kind of pools that the Japanese had so much trouble dealing with when they started to have the meltdown in the Fukushima reactors. And they've got dry cast pads at the Columbia Generating Station. They're putting their waste. They've got a spent fuel pool, which is inside the reactor building, above the reactor vessel. Why they did that is craziness also. And then they take the waste that's been sitting in the pool for the longest, and they transfer it into these dry casts, and they put the dry casts out on the pad.
What about
just like a Trojan.
Glassification?
Glassification is a wonderful, I guess, at least they're trying to use the glassification process to deal with the waste that they've got sitting at the tanks, from what they did with by the way, the fuel assemblies in the reactors that were next to the Columbia River that were once, the once through cooling thing, those fuel assemblies were taken out, and what was happening is they were put through a chemical metallurgical process which separated off the plutonium to make nuclear weapons, and the rest of the waste, the seething mass of radioactive isotopes, were some were put into tanks, some were just directly run into the ground. They've got groundwater contamination problems that are reaching out to the Columbia River. I mean, it's an amazing story. I mean, it's just an amazing story.
We've got about 3 or 4 more minutes left.
Well, I say to people again, put one of these on your carbon burner and educate yourself. I mean, there's wonderful opportunity here. For instance, I want to say that the Physicians for Social Responsibility through Chuck Johnson has been taking on the effort to close the Columbia Generating Station. I think people need to support that. There are other groups that are attempting to deal with it as well. We need to, nuclear-free Northwest. We need to free the Northwest, and we need to free ourselves and begin to create lives that are meaningful and live in harmony with our life support systems.
Nuclear weapons. We still have nuclear weapons.
That's true too. And not only that, the government is proposing to spend billions of dollars to upgrade the nuclear weapons at a time in which we have signed what was called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which meant that we were supposed to phase them out.
And on the other hand,
exactly. It's craziness. It's more of the craziness. So I suppose what Naomi is saying in her book, again, this changes everything. Put that right out there. There you go. This changes everything. What she's saying in this book is that global climate change is going to allow us and demand that we confront the economic realities that have helped create the destruction that we face, and will give us hopefully an opportunity to change that economy and the way we're living so that we're not part of insanity. For instance, when you think about the whole idea of the economy, it's based on growth for the sake of growth. Well, growth for the sake of growth is cancer. And cancer kills the body, ultimately.
It will kill our civilization.
Right, it will kill our civilization, and I think that that word you were talking about, love, needs to come between us. We need to live differently. We need to care about what we've done rather than pursue mindless realities that have not given us any sense of well-being or protection that life offers.
Let us stop now, and I want you to tell the viewers any thoughts or feelings you might have that would be of value for them to hear from you, a person who's dedicated his life to the kind of work that you're doing. So we're going to go to camera 3. Talk to the viewers, Lloyd, and tell them what's on your mind now.
Well, there's a huge obstacle that we need to overcome, most of which is within, I think, ourselves and the choices we make about the way that we want to live. And some of it seems almost so overwhelming that there's no path, you think that there is no path to go through. But I still think that there is a path to go through.
About 30 or 40 seconds more.
I don't think it's an easy one, but I think the thing that gets you through is perseverance. And I think that love that Dr. Don was talking about is the kind of engine of that perseverance.
It's a real pleasure to have you again.
Yeah, it's
Thank
nice.
you again.
Nice to be with you too.
Mr. East, shall we do a few PSAs to say goodbye? And you want to watch my shows on the web? Google Don Baham YouTube. There's hundreds of shows and all sorts of people I've interviewed. Some not as lovable as my friend Mr. Morbett, but some delightful. And we got to end corporate personhood, take our country back, go to Move to Amend to learn how we can end corporate personhood and reverse the Citizens United decision. And don't forget KFC. Yes, KFC. Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Thanks for watching.
And get your bumper stickers.
Get your bumper stickers.
You guys in the control room, get your bumper stickers.
Yes.
Head in here.
Good night. Thanks.